Good evening, everyone. My name is Livia Harley, and you're very welcome to Foreign Exchange Conversations on Architecture Here and Now, the second in the 2020-2021 edition of the ECD Master of Architecture lecture series. We have a very large audience in attendance again this evening, with over 300 people online from Ireland, from Switzerland, Germany and Spain, and from Venice, Italy this evening. A warm welcome to you all. The Foreign Exchange series is curated and hosted by myself, Livia, and my colleague, Emmett Scanlon, and it is presented by the School of Architecture and Environmental Policy in partnership with the Embassy of Switzerland in Ireland. This partnership with the Embassy enables a vital discussion on the cultural impact of architecture in Ireland, Switzerland and beyond. And we would like to acknowledge the Embassy's cooperation and to thank His Excellency Louise José Truon and Deirdre Sweeney and Luca Lalioli for their collaboration on this series with us. Our aim for this series is to share the work and the practice of architects from Switzerland with a broad public audience and to inform a discussion between Switzerland and Ireland about ideas in architecture, ideas which inevitably impact and enrich our individual and collective daily lives. The series pays particular attention to housing, climate, public realm, and working with existing buildings, so adaptive reuse, as well as the cultural importance of architecture today. The conversations bring architects from both countries and Irish cultural leaders together to exchange their thoughts on these subjects and to build on what is common between us. The first of these conversations with Maria Conan, Jonathan Sergison and Annie Fletcher took place in November in 2020. The second in April this year with Ellie Mosaibi, David Leach and Lynn Scarf. But if you have missed any of these conversations, don't worry, we will link the YouTube recording in the chat box here below for you this evening. The last conversation in this series will take place in September this year. Tonight, we're delighted to host Christian Sumi from Switzerland, Andy Vaughan Farrell and Maureen Keneally from Ireland, and to hear their conversation following Christian's talk. So Christian studied at the Zurich Polytechnic, the ETH, where he worked for the Institute of History and Architectural Theory. And he has also taught at Harvard University, the Lausanne Polytechnic and the University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. From 2008 to 2016, Christian and his life partner, Marianne Buchhalter, held a professorship at the Accademia di Architettura in Mendrisio. In 1984, they founded Buchhalter's Sumi Architekten in Zurich, where the practice gained an international reputation through their innovative wooden buildings and the unmistakable use of polychrome colors, amongst other things, in their projects. They have participated in the Venice Biennale in 2014 and 2018. And then last year, they revamped their firm under the title Atelier Buchhalter Sumi. Christian has published a number of books on architecture and most recently on the legendary car, the Citroën DS. So Yvonne co-founded Grafton Architects with Shelley McNamara in 1978, having graduated from the School of Architecture here at UCD College, Dublin, where she also taught from 1976 to 2002, and then was appointed adjunct professor in 2015. Yvonne has also taught at the APFL in Lausanne and at the Schools of Architecture at Harvard and at Yale. And she is currently full professor of architecture at Mendrisio in Switzerland. Yvonne and Shelley were commissioned with the curation of the Venice Biennale of Architecture in 2018, and their practice has won numerous awards for their work, including the prestigious RIBA Royal Gold Medal in 2020 and the Pritzker Prize later that year. Our second guest, Maureen, was Director of Poetry Ireland from 2013 until she commenced her role as Director of the Arts Council of Ireland in April 2020. She was previously Director of the Kilkenny Arts Festival and Artistic Director of the Mermaids Arts Centre in Bray, General Manager with the Fishamble Theatre Company, and she has also worked with the Druid Theatre, the Catslav Comedy Festival, the Arts Council, and the Design and Crafts Council of Ireland. On a freelance basis, she has collaborated with a wide range of organisations, including Theatre Forum, Sing Ireland, the Performance Corporation, and Age and Opportunity. She was the primary curator with the Mountains to the Sea, Dublin Dunleary Rathdown Festival, and programme director with Court International Festival of Literature. So without further ado, I am going to pass you on to Christian, who will present his talk now. We would like to encourage everyone in the audience to leave any comments or questions in the Q&A box during the conversation afterwards. And for the best way to view the webinar is side-by-side speaker view. And I will pass you on to Christian, who's going to share his slides with us now. So I'll ask Yvonne and Emmett as well to turn off their cameras. Thank you. So if you would like to share your
okay.
slides.
Mm-hmm. Let me see. Okay. Can you hear me? Is it okay?
Yes, that's perfect, Christian. Thank you.
Okay. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation of by UCD and the Swiss Ambassador. It's always a pleasure to speak or outside the country, to have, how to say, to test our ideas with our friends from outside the country. I also am very pleased that Yvonne and Maureen are with us, and I hope I can deliver some arguments to discuss later. This is my proposition. I call it 4 Swiss themes. The first one is infrastructure. I think Switzerland, this is a kind of keyword in Switzerland, not only for architects. And then, as found, it will be the main part of the lecture, is about sustainability, dealing with the existing, densification, and so on. Also in Switzerland, an important object now. The third one is the modern. This will be very short. We were asked to say something about our teaching, our education. I will take a small example by Le Corbusier. And the last group are kinds of scenarios, exhibitions, and so on. I did put this famous saying by Peter Smithson, as found is a small affair. It is about being careful. I think this is wonderful. And I hope some of our projects are in respect of this saying. I have also to say the projects within the last 10 years were, we did make it together with our 2 partners, Yves Sheen and Urs Winkler, who have now our office under the name of Oxide Architecture. Okay, infrastructure, big issue in Switzerland, and I would start with a research we did at the school, which is about a kind of encyclopedia of infrastructure around the Gotardo region in Switzerland. So the Gotardo is this passport between south and north, a very important natural element, which was basic in I think in creation of the mentality of Switzerland. The book was, the subtitle was Landscape Myths, Technology. I just want to take out one short example, a stamped series of 1937, which you see here, 5 variants with, this is a very famous place in Switzerland. It has a waterfall, a little village, and a very narrow valley. Of course, everything is a little bit fake. There are some of the drawings are with a village, no village at all, a house. So it's a kind of interpretation of this side, and it's a very picturesque view. If you look on the other side, the real photo, it's clear that the photo is not so, how to say, impressing, but the stamp is very impressing. What happens then 10 years, 20 years later, we have a new series of stamps, which is now completely different. And it's called Landschaft und Technik, landscape and technique. This is a very important shift in Switzerland, how we look at nature, because finally here we did accept that the main element generating Swiss landscape is infrastructure. And so this is a kind of paradigm shift from the first series of stamps to this new one, which I think is for the mentality an important thing. So this kind of infrastructure. The first example I want to show is the headquarters of Swiss Tourismus. This is a renovation or no, a big project in an existing building. And this was very interesting because we could somehow work with this kind of concept of also of cliches of Switzerland. And I want to show you two elements. This was how the place looked before. It was a big city hall, very popular in the 20s from socialists. Lenin was in this place, later on the fascists. So it has a tough life. In the 40s, they did put in a garage in the hall. So you see here the ceiling on top, and you see it here. And then and then we were asked to put in these offices for Swiss Tourismus. And what we did accept both, how to say, the whole story, the garage and the whole thing, which was very complicated because there was problem of light and so on. But I want to show you, this is the section, and you see, and we took two elements which are related to the things I said before, a tunnel, which you see here. You know, this is a huge tunnel, and we did somehow work with this as a key, as a kind of reference of Swiss landscape. This is the entrance, so you enter like you go take the tunnel to Gotthard, you take the thing. So it's this kind of reverence. You know, Switzerland is full of tunnels. I don't know what it means exactly for our mentality. And the other, so that's the entrance from inside. And the second one, that's the plan again. So you have the long entrance here. And the other element is a ramp, the tremola here, which I would like to show you shortly. It is between the old scene and thing. And this again is a kind of a reference, of an emblem of Swiss landscape. This is the famous part of street in the Gottardo region. So this crazy ramp. So with this project, we did play with these elements of Swissness, if you want to say. The third example is something different. It's a hotel in Zurich, Hotel Zürichberg. And what is interesting here, it's not so much the hotel itself, which is the main idea of the project, but it's the garage. If you see the section here, you see this is the hotel, the section here, and this is a huge garage below. And this is another tunnel, so you enter from the existing building, you enter here. So what I'm trying to say, the driver of the project is not the hotel typology of the hotel, but it's the garage behind. So another infrastructure. That is the parking lot. It's an endless ramp. And here you see then the relation. So this from below comes the garage. You go out, cut, and then start the hotel. We like this kind of drivers, you know, that you have an element which somehow solve you somehow all the problems. So in this case, I think it's this idea of the infrastructure. Okay, now the second part of my little talk is as found. relating to the saying of Peter Smithson. I think as found is an important theme related to the question of densification and the question of sustainability. This is clear, this is, has become one of the main issues in architecture. And we realize that more than half of all projects somehow are part of this kind of projects. This means there's something existing and we have to deal with it. There's a first group I would call densification of the garden city. You know, the garden city are from the 50s. Characteristic is the green, the green carpet you have. And then within this green carpet, you have the house like kind of floating around. So this is a Siedlung in Zurich. On the left side, you see the existing Siedlung. On the right side, you see the densification. And it was a clever decision that the densification, which is about half of the volume, you can build more, is realized not over the whole, not all over the whole Siedlung, but they decided to take down the 6 houses and the densification is within here. The way we solved it, we blew up the volumes to save somehow the green carpet and to have again this picturesque view through the whole Siedlung. This is how it looks. So you have the green carpet and then these huge volumes which are placed in a kind of, yeah, we might say in a picturesque way, each another. What is very important and the big quality of these places is the deepness of space. You know, you have always a view to something. The plans are very simple. Four apartments, 1, 2, 3. And then what is typical that the relation inside-outside is through this huge balcony in the edge, which creates quite an interesting view in this green. So you have this huge view into the side. The second example is the same kind of typology, but it's a tower. Again, a beautiful tower from the beginning of the 70s. You see the trees and the green, and we have to add another, I think, 800 square meters. This is the site, and you see what we did. Instead of putting the volume aside or something like that, we decided that we will add this volume as an extension of the existing house, using the existing stairs and so on. So we could keep free all this green space, which is part of a larger context. This is how it looked before, and this is how it looks now. So you have this kind of layer, which is about 3 meters and 60, which is behind. And this is what we did. I'm trying to find the cursor, sorry. So this is the existing house, one apartment, and this is the layer we did add. And it's a kind of duplex typology. So you enter here, you go up, or you enter here, or you go down. The section is like this, and it is clear it relates to the concept of the unité d'habitation of Le Corbusier. The funny thing is that it's a kind of a unité d'habitation section without the rue intérieure. So that's quite interesting, you know, that you take an existing typology, but you take the driver of the whole project, you take it out. This is how it looks. Okay, the next group within the theme of as found are extensions or additions. This is quite, I would say, is quite classical. You know, we know this. I would like to show you 2 examples. This is an industrial building belonging to ETH Zurich. This is a campus where they make the tests of material. So what we were asked is somehow to double the height of of an existing hall. And this is what you see. In the end, I think it's about 12 meters high. And this is what we did. Above, you see the existing section, this kind of low level, and below you see what we did. What we were interested in this case, somehow to integrate our intervention within the existing typology and architecture, which is a very nice architecture relating to Mies van der Rohe, the IIT building in Chicago. Here again, you see the enormous break, but this is the whole. Sorry, this is the whole inside. It's a wood construction, quite developed because the fresh air condition is in the beams here and so on. And this is the view. So somehow we did add a new volume, but it's how to say, it's within the line of the existing architecture, which we could call as found. A second example, which I like very much because it's an extension of a kindergarten we did, but not by me and by Maren and me, but by a friend of us who won the competitions. So what you see here is this is our kindergarten in Lustenau. This is the extension, and it's very nice done because Bernardo Bader, who is the architect, this is kind of a remake of an element which is on the other side of the thing. So he somehow related to not only to the geometry of our kindergarten, but of some elements of our kindergarten. Here you see it. So this is somehow Burkhalter Sumi. This is a kind of a faked Burkhalter Sumi, and this is now the new addition. This is the plan of This is the model. Here is our kindergarten, and then the extension here. This is the plan. So this part then has become an element who relates between two things. Very interesting. 30 years of difference is also 30 years of difference of typology, of the way today you build a kindergarten, because in our kindergarten there was no relation to the outside directly. You had to go through this workshop here, while with Bernardo Bader, the kindergarten is organized around this space. So I think that as an ensemble, it became also from the pedagogical point of view a very rich and diverse kindergarten. This is the view again. Okay, now the third group is a very common one. This is the group of so-called footprints. That means you have an existing house, you take it down, and you somehow, for a lot of reasons, you respect the footprint. And the first one is a little observation center we have in planning near Oxford. This is a very beautiful site. This is part of the Thames, which is here. It's a kind of island. So here was a little house, 6 by 6 meter, and a little terrace, 12 by 12 meter. So in our projects, we did more or less, we respected the footprint. So the 6 by 6 meters are here, and this is the terrace. This is the model. And what we did, of course, we did not read. It's another function also. It's this observatory station, and so it's like you start with a given geometry, and then the building somehow gets crazy. That's what we did. So you see here again the grundriss, 6 by 6 meter, the terrace, and then the more you go up, you have this kind of penetration, this cantilevered element, which go out and which to relate to the nature, because this is what the building is. So a footprint, and then on top it moves out in different direction. The other one is a simple project we did in Bellinzona. It's a courtyard house in wood construction with a gallery typology, which is very classical in Ticino. But what is interesting that actually the courtyard or the geometry of the outside spaces, here you have the plan with this courtyard, and there's a little tower on here. So this outdoor space here and this outdoor space here actually relate exactly to an existing garage. So again, like in the hotel, there is something which you do not see, but it's generating the project. And so it's, in this case, it's the footprint of the garage which generate this very classical house, this South Gallery house, which has a long tradition. So the last group on this thing is on the protection, but it's not a totally protection, it's structure and facade. I want to show you two examples. The first one is a small industrial concept context where we did the total renovation. This is how it looks. It has different phases. So the first one, second one, this is the power station. Then in the fourth is this one, and later on this one. So it's this very beautiful conglomerate of different volumes built in different times. I would like to show you two observations or two strategies we did in this project. The first one is the problem with it. I only focus this part here. Is the houses are very deep and you have no light, so you have to bring light within, and that's what we did. The blue thing, you see it here. We broke holes into the existing building, like we call it in German. It's called Lichtkanon, where you bring light from above into the building. And then, of course, we did work with the light coming in with different glasses and so on. So within this structure, we introduce a completely new quality. The second thing is you are not allowed to touch the facade. And so we decided to work with kind of three separated pergolas, which are placed in front of the volume, which to look like this. So we kept the facade, the volume, and we did put this thing, which creates quite a nice quality to live within, because you have the kind of part of the house in this huge volume of the fabric, and you can go outside and you have your little garden house. The second one is art gallery and ateliers we did put in an existing military depot. Again, a very, very nice, house, huge roof, basement in stone. And the only thing we did are these kind of windows of the four ateliers you have. This is the section. This was actually how it was, the yellow, how it was before. And we stayed within the same geometry. We just moved up this part and made it bigger. This is how it looks from inside. So it's a huge window from 6 meters high. And this is the plan with this series of windows, and this is the view in it. The second intervention I would like to show is then in the ground floor. This is part of the ground floor exhibition. We had to relate the ground floor with the cellar below. And instead of making a big stair, this kind of show you want to relate the cell with the ground floor. We decided the opposite, that we don't want to show it, and we did work within this concept of boucher, you know, like in all the Palladio villas, you have a lot of stairs which you do not see. So this was the concept. You go in here, it's very, very small, steep, and then you come out in the outer space. And this is the hole where you are in the other space. So these were these two intervention. Okay, now I check my time. Yeah, I think it's okay. We make a very small, how to say, excursus into the question of modernism. Modernism in Switzerland is very important because we are, it's this kind of Protestant rationalist attitude, and we, how to say, we are more a land of presentation than of representation. So a lot of concept of the modern were very close to a certain mentality of Switzerland. And the other thing is, starting at ETH, Le Corbusier was a main issue. You know, it was Corbusier every morning and so on. In a good way, because it was the moment where the archives were open and we could have another view to the way that Le Corbusier worked. So I give you an example, which I would call from composition to decomposition. This is a publication I had the chance to do about the first steel construction of Le Corbusier in Geneva. But I just want to take out one aspect. It's the question of housing. And this is, how to say, these are the prototypes in the theme of housing for Le Corbusier. The red one is the Maison Citron, which is for Le Corbusier. This is the one family house. And then this is 1920. 1922, he was studying on big blocks, and he called them, these blocks, immeuble villa. Now, if we look closer a little bit to the plan, I don't know whether you can see the plan on the right side. Probably not. But anyway, if you overlap the Citron typology with the typology of the immeuble villa, you realize, like, Le Corbusier just took this one family house and made an adaptation that it becomes part of a block. And so if you look carefully, even the piano is still here, you know. And here he just moved the chair on the other side of the table. And then he moved the eating table from this side to this side. So what I'm trying to say, that Le Corbusier is using an existing typology where he was developed by adapting certain new parameters and did move it into another composition. But he realized that actually these plans were too big. You know, in the 20s, there was the theme of how to say, cheap housing and all these things. So in a second step, together with Charlotte Perriand, he did exactly the opposite. He started with a cellule de 14 mètres carrés, which is this one, for one person. And then he was studying how can you organize an apartment for one person, for two, for three. And he developed a whole machine until a person had with 10 beds. Of course, this is, how to say, this is a research. You know, of course, today we can criticize these things, but I'm interested in this movement from composition to decomposition. And so that's the difference here. And what is interesting, you know, 30 years later, in the famous Unité d'Habitation, he took exactly a part of this study, namely this space here, which became the space in the Unité d'Habitation you see here. So we were interested at this time to understand the strategy of Le Corbusier, how he works, you know, how he how he proceed, how he moves, and it's very complex because he had in the 50s he had a lot of strategies and he could combine them. And then of course you know all these sections, you know, from the immeuble villa to the unité d'habitation in different variations. To finish, the story is quite interesting, and actually the section, I'm not sure, I hope you can find it. Shit, I don't know. Here above. No. Above you see on the left side, you see the section of the concept of the section of the unité d'habitation. And this is a paper where Le Corbusier is making a proposition of a fee with a client. So this paper, which dates from 28, proves that already in 28, the concept, the section of the unité d'habitation was already there. Okay, now the last group, yeah, I think you have time, is something we like. We like to make exhibitions. We had the chance that we could work with historians, art historians on quite big exhibitions like Semper, and then there was one of robots and so. What we think with this exhibition or also installation, it's a chance to reflect and to exaggerate. That's why we are always fascinated by doing this kind of work. So I start with a very early project we did with some friends together. It's a street installation for art and sculpture exhibition. And it's an installation with two walls on very tiny steel feet. You see here, if I can show it. And then the wooden blankets. And then you see the two cables and they cross. And this wall is hanging in these cables. And we did put this really to the extreme. So the relation between the length and the extension of the whole was all completely on the edge. The problem is that we did it a little bit too much, and the whole construction break, because under the tension of the wall hanging in the cables, there was a kind of tension of 8 centimeters, and this was the fact that it fall down. Anyway, I think two things. So our first construction we did together with Marian was an art installation. And, you know, this we did in my hometown. And then the other day, my father came to me and said, son, what the fuck are you doing? You know? And then I said, okay. Then finally I met Marian, and I became a kind of okay architect. The other thing is a shelter for art installation we do also in Göttingen. For the same client. This is the house I showed you before, which is here. This is the Bauer construction site, and it's a completely concrete building. It's like a shelter. It's a little bit like a bunker. There will be no windows, nothing. It's just a shelter for this artwork, and it has to do with the tough situation of this region we will see later. This is the plan. This is the artwork. And this is by Hans Optebeck. What will be interesting is this kind of, this is a very educated culture piece of art, and in the tradition of Belgian surrealism probably, which will be placed right in the nature of the Swiss Alps. The theme of the installation is collector's house. And just 10 days ago, our site manager, he sent us this image. that was pretty scary, but it finally we did understand what we are doing, that we, as I said before, what has this art piece, which is how to say, which belongs to the world of urban life, maybe Maureen, she can say then something to that. It's a transfer from this world into the world of the Alps, which is a completely another one. And I think for the guests, it might be quite interesting to enter from this outside, which is tough, which is which aggressive and so on, and you enter and you have this installation. This is from the point of view of construction, it's quite complicated. We do this work together with a Swiss engineer, Jürg Gonset. So the shed construction is, we work with pretension and so on. The other example is the Biennale 2014, where in relation to the book I showed you at the beginning, we made an installation, and we did show some films. And actually, I have to say it's a cooperation with ETH Zurich, with Professor Shiro and us. And we, as a kind of a preview of a book, we showed some elements of the thing of this book, Infrastructure. Then what is interesting that later on, some young architects, they did call us and they saw the exhibition, they knew the book, and they said, well, would you agree that we could make an exhibition out of the elements or the material of a book? And of course, we said, yeah, that's this kind of recycling idea or shows old ideas in a new context is very interesting. And they made an amazing, beautiful exhibition with the material from our book. They made a completely new combination. And we did, again, with zebra music, we did make a show part of the film, which we did show at the expo, and I just want to show very short. This is a point cloud animation. It's completely digital nature, and it is made by ETH Zurich, by Professor Shiro. And the interesting thing with these point clouds is that you can look through the volume. So that's why Shiro did called it the unexpected. Okay, the last installation we could do by invitation of Yvonne and Shelley, which we were very pleased that we could do this project at the Biennale in Venice, is a kind of a rethinking or reinterpretation of a structure of Konrad Wachsmann. Konrad Wachsmann is one of the key figure in development of industrial building. And we had, for a long time, we had the idea that we would like to build this piece here. It's an endless structure, and it's called a grapevine, and you see why it's called grapevine. So the structure is kind of turned, has a rotation. This was also the chance finally to publish all the research on Wachsmann we did within the last 20 years. So we did put grapevine in the center of the whole research, and then could make the book. This is this structure made in wood with colors of the Salubra collection of Le Corbusier on this amazing place that Yvonne and Shelley proposed to us. You know, this was just like an old dream, doing this in front of the Pavillon de la Biennale. it was, this is a long story. You know, it's an interpretation, and just to make it short, in the original drawing of Waxman, which you can almost not build, the elements, they do not touch. We decided to make the opposition, the opposite, that they touch, and so that the whole structure would become stable. So I'm speaking about this part here. So there were some discussions going on, if we can do that, if this is correct or whatever. But I think very often the opposition of a solution is also a good solution. This could something we could discuss. This was prefabricated in Zurich. And this is, of course, is an icon image again. And here again with zebra music, we made a kind of, we did exaggerate this structure and we make it move. And at the vernissage of the book, we did show a short part of the film, and this is the last thing I would like to show you. Okay, Livia, that's it. Here again, I have 4 themes as the base of discussion or whatever you propose. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christian. That was wonderful. If you could stop sharing your slides, that would be great. Thank you. And I would invite Yvonne as well to turn on her her camera. And here we have, yes, the 4 of you. That's terrific, or the 4 of us, I should say. That was fascinating, Christian. The diversity of all of those elements, I'm sure, will inspire some very stimulating discussion. I was particularly taken myself by the adaptive reuse of those industrial projects. That's very refreshing to see. It's very challenging and very exciting. And I think it must be the first time I've ever seen or heard an architect present an extension made to their own building, to their own work. So that was also very, very, it was very beautiful work in both cases, and very generous of you to show that. And I particularly, I suppose, the technology and the difference in the building and the approach to the way kindergartens were planned and the way play spaces are now planned. That was really fascinating, and yeah, very generous of you to show that. I'd like to invite Maureen to respond first to whatever she feels like responding to from Christian's very exciting lecture.
Great. Well, thank you. And hi, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me to be along this evening. Christian, that was fascinating. Thank you so much. As Olivia said, what a range of work. It's so diverse. I think you certainly showed us that you satisfied Peter Smithson's diktat. It is about being careful. That's certainly evident in every single piece that you showed us. I'd love to be taught by you, I have to say. I think your students are in a very, very lucky position altogether. And as Livia said, everything from, you know, the hotel and the tourist office, the art gallery, just the evidence of care is absolutely clear throughout. I loved the pergola as well. And I suppose we're all now so much more attuned to seeking outdoor spaces. So I would yearn to be in a space like that, I have to say, right now. I just wanted to say that my own impression of Swiss culture is of it being very well invested in over the years. Throughout my career, I've had the fortune of visiting a dance festival in Lausanne, of having always had fantastic connection with Pro Helvetia, who helped me bring an orchestra from Bern, and of seeing Swiss artist Roman Signer, who was brought to the Butler Gallery by Natalie Wadick, who'd be well known to many of the audience here as now the director of the Irish Architecture Foundation. So my sense, as I say, is always that the culture was incredibly well supported there, you know, and the idea of ambition, there was never any shortage of support for ambition. And architecture in Ireland, in terms of its support through the arts infrastructure, is growing, I'm happy to say. And that the investment from the Arts Council, the organisation that I'm fortunate to lead, the state agency, has trebled in the last couple of years, but admittedly that's from a low base. But I want to emphasise that in terms of it being an important part of the culture, that's very much held dear by myself and my colleagues, and it's something that we very much want to work on. And I would be very hopeful for the future of architecture as an art form in the Arts Council. And from the very first piece of government legislation, which is back in 1951, the Arts Act, architecture was called out there as an art form. And from the introduction of Éistóna, which is our Academy of Artists, architects were there from the start, including Yvonne and Shelley and many other of our finest architects. So I'm happy to say that that's a good way for us to support architecture. But we have much more to do, and I'd be curious to hear how architecture meshes with the other artistic disciplines in Switzerland. I think that we have in the Arts Council, we will be introducing our revised policy later this year in a couple of months, and it's very exciting, and it's at a really exciting time because, as we all know, the world has changed in the last year, and our approach to space is transformed as well. So I think that we have a huge opportunity to tell people how architecture impacts on our lives, and it gives us a really good opportunity to make architecture more visible as an art form. So I would be really, really excited about that. We're introducing our new architecture policy at the same time as our spatial policy. So obviously that is really good timing as well. But it's also set against the backdrop of our equality, human rights and diversity policy. And I think, you know, in a country where social boundaries can often be very divisive, that we can use architecture to shape an environment that's much more at ease with the diversity of our culture. So I would be very, very hopeful that, you know, we can make strides with our brilliant architects in that regard in years to come. And just going back to your Peter Smithson, it's about being careful. I was listening to the podcast that Emmett runs the other night, where he had 4 emerging architects, one of whom was Tom O'Brien, who, you know, whose clarion call was to be sound and to call for more empathy and more compassion in architecture, something that I think you've demonstrated, something that I certainly know Yvonne and Shelley and their team demonstrate in abundance in their work, you know. And I think that the opportunity to create spaces with care that make people feel more social, that make people feel better for being in them, the gathering places are going to be so much more important to us as we emerge out of this pandemic. So that makes me very, very excited about the future.
Thank you, Maureen. Would you like to respond to that, Christian?
Yeah, first of all, I'm very happy that you like your arguments you developed around the saying of Peter Smithsons. You know, the Smithsons are very, I mean, they are important for us, maybe less by the work, but by the thinking. I think they were kind of there's a kind of anarchistic thinking behind, with a lot of breaks also. And so we things, maybe it's a little bit of contradiction. I think things are disconnected today. There's a big fragmentation going on, you spoke about, and the question is a little bit how we deal with it. You know, I think fragmentation, if it's not cynically, has also a lot of power. And so that's what we learned from the Smithsons. The, the relation art architecture is, of course, is a classical theme. We are, I think we are not artists, you know, that's something different. But we can do maybe building or spaces or objects which have artistic qualities, you know. I think that is a very important discussion with students. You know, we know that from Mendrisio, these young people, everybody think he's an artist, and you have to beat them on the head and said, hey, just forget it. You know, you, in the best case, you became a kind of okay architect. So be a little bit thing. But the art, it is clear art production is important. So for us, for instance, the art of the constructive Kunst, Max Biel, Lohse, and all these dramatic, they're very basic, not in the sense that we like them so much, but in the sense that it is an art which creates a kind of relation between your brain and what is there, you know. And I think architecture could have the same quality. And the famous saying of Frank Stella, I think, is "You see what you see." Is an interesting saying. It's not that easy because there is no escape from meaning and science and so, but the immediate impression of something is for us is very important in the work. And the last remark, when you spoke about space, I just forgot the name, famous German philosopher, she said that public space should not only, how to say, accept it or make it work like a marketplace, but public space should also represent it. That's another very, it sounds very simple, but it's kind of complex. So so maybe these are just some comments I can give.
Ivana, I don't know if you beat your students over the head and tell them that they're not artists, but I'm sure you share some of Christian's views on that.
I think, first of all, Christian and Marianne are marvelous teachers. And I'd just like to say at a human level, when Shelley and I went to teach in Mendrisio, that not only are they fantastic architects and teachers, but also unbelievably generous and kind in terms of bringing people into the community of teachers and support. So so I would count them, I hope, as friends as well as colleagues. And I would just like to say that teaching, what I find amazing about the work that Christian has described in the modest way, in fact, about his books and his teaching, what I find incredible is the passion of wanting to learn why architects did certain things and what can we learn, and to put them not only in exhibition but also in books. That I find your way of thinking, that whenever I watch the way you teach, let's say, Christian and Marianne, that the students would make these incredibly huge models that would not only look at the structure, but also deal with the water system and the practicalities and how something was made. You really did reveal something. But I'd like to just maybe, first of all, I really enjoyed your presentation this evening, Christian. Thank you very much for it. And I'd like to start at the beginning of that, because you mentioned there to Maureen about, you know, public space and representation. I found it really interesting that you started with the Goddard, you know, this huge wall of granite, I think it is, isn't it? That kind of holds Switzerland in one position, and then Ticino is like a shore to the sun down going to the Mediterranean. So you begin with this, and then you describe landscape and representation and the kind of Swiss version of the mountain and the cottage and then the little villages, and then that changes into the bravery of infrastructure. I find that really interesting, because as architects and as a country of 5 million, and you're about 9 million, I think, in Switzerland. And the changeover from kind of rural, if you like, densities to going into the infrastructure of more urban life. I found your stamp story a fantastic analogy about a country looking at itself in a different way. So, and it's also a passion about that infrastructure can be beautiful. I mean, some of those sections that you're talking about carving into the mountain and the practicalities, I think what's really good, are strong and really powerful about Switzerland is that it transformed the need to carve into a mountain for practical reasons to get from A to B into architecture and engineering. And when I look at all of the work that you're presenting, it's also, you are a kind of a master crafts person because you take color and sound and, excuse me, materiality and structure. And there's also an element of play. Yes, there's really serious work, but you're also quite playful. Yourself and Marianne kind of play because you're able to take the seriousness of architecture, but you play it. You know, you play this kind of trumpet entrance into the car park, and you know it's a tunnel, but it's also a bit of fun. You know that you drag people along, and then that repeats itself come in your hotel. But the canons of light, as I love the kind of you're like a dancer, the way you go from research to making and a serious joint, and then Waxman, and that I'm witnessing, you know, an architect in full flight between coming through a carved mountain to talking about structure and sound, and then the avalanche. Like, there's nothing more convincing to know that as architects we have to deal with the earth than watching the absolute cubic meterage of danger coming towards you, and that you're building with the little, you know, outer shell like a snail protecting the art piece inside. Metaphorically, I thought that was extraordinary. That I'm sure Maureen is in terms of the Arts Council, we're thinking of that inside is the jewel of the art piece, let's say, and that the crust of architecture has to protect from the forces, I mean, incredible forces of nature. I really found it like a symphony listening to and the structure of the four. So you began with asking me about teaching. I find that I'm sitting here in my home listening to Christian continue teaching, and his students, I think, himself and Marianne, their studio was always something you were hanging on the outer sides of it, curious about what they were studying, because he focuses. I think that's what's really brilliant. You take Corb, Le Corbusier. You don't just kind of, you know, refer to him. You burrow into even that page you showed about him trying to work out the fees for some project. You know, you're burrowing, you're making a tunnel into Corb's mind, and you're making a tunnel into Waxman. You know, you don't just say, oh, that's a very nice, I mean, that beautiful thing that you made on the lawns in the Giardini was just a gorgeous thing in itself, even if it had nothing to do with Waxman. You made his work come alive by virtue of your the way you think. So it's I really, so in response to teaching, he's a terrific teacher.
That's a great answer. Thank you, Yvonne. Yeah, I think it's very tantalizing, as you say, and there's a lot of drama in everything, and you want to know more. So you you seduce people in, and then you with these sort of tidbits, and then we definitely want to know more about the theatre of everything. I wanted to ask you a question about your research, but I'm sure Maureen would like to respond to what Yvonne has said about those aspects.
Yeah, sure. Well, and just thinking about the theatre of Christian's work, and your comment about, you say to the students, no, you're not an artist, you know, like, and it does seem to me that, yeah, I think Yvonne mentioned dance, that there's just such a choreography in the way you approach your work, that what would you describe your own influences from other art forms for us?
You mean me?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So other art forms other than architecture.
I think well, you know, of course, it would be great if architects are artists, and sometimes maybe we have this thing, but I think art. But I have very traditional ideas. You know, Richard Serra, who said in the 70s, the main thing is art has absolutely no function. And I believe somehow in these things, you know, and this is the first huge contradiction to architecture. You know, with our objects, they have a function, real function, shelter or whatever. And I think art has a completely, a much more enlarged view to this question. Of course, it has a function, but it's very complex. You know, it deals with illusion it gives you, but we, you know, also the work of Beuys, for instance, for us is very important, but we know we could never do that, but Beuys, you know, he made us thinking about the sensibility of material, you know, that steel is not just steel, it's something more behind. So the thing is, Maureen, I have to say, this is now I speak as a professional. The profession, we have to be very clear. There's a kind of a dissolving going on of our profession, and it doesn't make sense if we start crying. It's just a fact. The second thing, the professional issues becomes very, very complex. It's high speed, all the different phases you have, they are overlapping. So for these young people, they have to be ready somehow to survive this huge machine which goes on. So then the discussion about art things is a little bit later on, you know, and so that's my thing. I also have to say, you know, Marion and me, we have completely different backgrounds, you know, and I think what Yvonne said, you know, I'm more the boring engineer, you know, which is okay with me. You know, I remember we did competitions and I had to make the garage. I'm very good in this kind of garage, and every time when I came up from my garage and said, well, I'm finished, Warren said, well, go down again, we need to save another 2 million. And then I went to save money. No, and you know, I have this solid background from IT. Maureen has another background. You know, she as a young architect, she was in touch with this avant-garde movement in she did work in Florence, Super Studio, and then in the States. And so somehow yeah, it's a miracle that we bring these things together, and so that's, I think that has to do with a certain respect also for each other, you know. So it's this combination, and then we are a couple, which is another other issue, and somehow we survive, you know, and but yeah, that's, I don't know, probably I did not answer your question.
No, that's okay. But yeah, you seem to have done more than survived, and I hope you kept your dad happy too, satisfied. I know that, like, Livia and Emmett, you're involved in the end of college year now at the moment, and just reflecting on the opportunities for young architects in Ireland, and the sort of supports that we make available to them, and we want to make more available to them through newish schemes, like there's a project scheme and architects can apply for bursaries, you know, and as I said before, there's an increasing investment in architecture from the Arts Council. So I hope that, you know, as people embark, young architects come out in the world, you know, that they would expect to be supported, that they can realistically expect to be supported, like an agency by the Arts Council. And, you know, going back to the sort of the great younger emerging people coming through, like Tom O'Brien or Norella Breen or Jennifer O'Donnell, you know, who been attached to the Arts Council in the past through various awards and schemes, that there is a supportive environment there for sure. And that there's so much, you know, again, there's lots of multidisciplinary work going on. So there's very, very interesting work going on there. And there are organizations that we in the Arts Council support, like the Irish Architecture Foundation, who run Open House and Architects in Schools. And that's such a hugely important part of the work that we do. And then Architecture at the Edge and Open House in Limerick. So, you know, that it is a very, very vibrant, very dynamic time.
Yeah, it's a dynamic time, and it's great that those supports are there, because it's been a very difficult time as well, particularly for architects who are, as you say, graduating just now this year, or even coming up to graduating next year. The last 18 months of you know, their education, the end of their career really in university has been tricky for staff and for students. And the relationships, the kind of collaborative, collegiate relationships that we build with students, particularly in those last years, are very fragile because of the pandemic. And it is very heartening to know that there are supports available, you know, and that once you're, you know, you go beyond a certain stage after you qualify, and then you start to diversify in what you want to do, or whether you go abroad or whether you stay in Ireland. Obviously, when things get a little bit better, hopefully in the next, say, 12 months, there'll be more opportunity for students to go abroad and get experience in other countries. But if they want to stay in Ireland, that they know that there is a very dynamic support system. And the Arts Council have new awards as well, which are collaborative, which are really interesting. The Agility Award particularly, which has come up in the last 12 months. But yeah, it's been very tough for them, and you know, we want the best particularly for this graduating year, I think. Yvonne, I know that you have students in Mendrisio as well who are finishing this year too, so it must have been difficult for them with the online teaching and all that it brought with them, you know, and not being able to have that sort of sense of one-to-one sort of bond, or, you know, dynamic that you have in studio teaching.
I think that we have to be careful, I think, that when things happen, and this is a big thing happening, that we are able as humans to translate that into some way of reflecting. And that when I listened to Christian this evening talking about scenarios and reflection and exaggerating, I think that one of the important lessons that we can witness now in all of us, even the fact that this evening we're together on a screen in our own homes or wherever we are, but we are participating, that by, there's a line in Hamlet, by indirections find directions out. And I think that the longing for camaraderie, the longing for each other, that if we as human beings can really feel the depth of the things we can't have at the moment, then you realize how valuable they are when we do have them. And I think that students are amazing. They're producing, yes, we're missing each other. Everybody is missing other people. But I do think that what we're learning is that that technology can be a fantastic support. It can connect us. It has its limits. But I do think that longing is also a force, you know, longing to be sitting around, you know, the conversations with Christian and Marianne that Shelley and I would have had in Mendrisio are really valuable, both at an intellectual level, at a human level. So yes, we're missing a lot, but we're also, I mean, we're in practice a long time. We've been through, I don't know, many recessions, and then life goes very busy and then it gets quiet. And what I liked very much about the way that Christian presented tonight was that in the 4 topics of infrastructure and as found and the modern and scenarios, it probably goes back to Maureen's kind of question about the kind of influences on him. I mean, life, I can kind of see life and music and color and making and the modesty to say that he's down in the, he's down in the cellar doing the car park layout. You know what I mean? That's not so 100% true really, because the down below is holding the above as well. I mean, I'm amazed at the car park that became the housing, and you realize that it's yin yang, and that your question about the teaching and nowadays with COVID, it is terrible, but people have died. There are strangers who have invented vaccination. So we're all indebted to strangers, and the fact that we're all linked together, and that through this time we realize that nature is so beautiful. The tide comes in and out every day, and we're guaranteed at the moment that the sun rises in the east every day. I think what's wonderful is that we can go back to the real basics and say, the sun, maybe I won't gamble on it, the sun will rise tomorrow morning in the east, and that is a comfort. So in terms of students, they're doing fantastic work, making models out of the most inventive things, because they're not at all the machines. People are imagining. So I think imagination is free. And tonight I found the tunnel, the references that Christian is talking about, that the ramp becomes a kind of a something deep in his psyche that kind of comes out in a project. Maybe what happens is that we, over time, things that we're experiencing now will come out and really affect the depth of all the students who are qualifying now in their real work. So I think human experience finds expression either in art, where Maureen was discussing it, but also in the way that Christian, he's talking about the stamp and the tunnels, and it's transformed through creativity. So I think to the students, stay alive, stay well, you will hug each other. Everybody will hug the people that are dear to them in some time soon, but it's more than survival. Be aware of what we're missing, and then we'll find it.
Yeah, nicely put. I agree totally. I'd like to just read out some of the comments. We don't have any questions, but we have a lot of very nice comments, Christian, that I just want to pick out a couple for you. One comment was, I like the way you play with typologies to achieve an architecture that you wanted, which I think is a very succinct way of putting the way you work, looking at people like Mies and Corb and those kind of precedents and the typologies around them. There appears to be a wonderful sense of intellectual freedom and a playful anarchy connecting through all the projects. Truly wonderful work. And the one question actually at the end here, and this is about the installation in Beale that failed, in inverted commas. The audience member says it looked very successful. Can you say something about the value of failed experiments?
The question goes to me.
Yep.
Yeah.
The question is to you, that the experiment in Beale, you describe it as a project, but it was in fact successful, and it's about those things, those lessons from trying and from failing.
Yeah. Well, how to say? Of course, it was a horrible issue. In the next day, it was in the newspaper, and this was not a good issue. And then we started again, and we had another technique, and so on. So this is not fun. But I mean, the notion of failure, I think, is part of every creative figure. You have to go to the edge to not to find out new things. That's okay, but but to feel who you are, let's say like this, you know. And architecture somehow is constantly in this field, you know. You need exaggeration to understand what the hell is exactly going on. So I would say this try and fail is part of the design process, you know. Sometimes it's dramatically, sometimes it's boring, and sometimes it's helpful. So I would not, I think also other professions have this thing, you know. We should not overestimate the creativity of architects. You know, there are a lot of other professions which are very creative, but on another level. You know, it's not the visual thing. You know, we are working on the programmatic visual issue. You know, look at something to understand what happens here, and all this relation. You know, for us, the theory of Rudolf Arnheim is very important. You know, this kind of very old theory, but still working. So yeah, experience that's like Jimi Hendrix experience. He went to the edge, maybe a little bit too far, but yeah. But don't we should not fall in the role of heroes. You know, musicians are things, but I don't see any other way to come forward. You know, the things are disconnected, and that's what Yvonne said before. We have to be very careful to look that maybe we can combine certain issues in a new way, and then see what exactly happens. You know, and you know, it's to say sustainability itself, to use wood, that's okay, you know, but we have to be also very critical. You know, there are some wood elements are horrible, you know, because of the glue. So this is not yet architect. It's just the beginning we can start to think about, and so I think with all maybe just as a last thing, but you know, when we did this research or for the landscape, the Cotato, we were criticized that we did not work enough with people from academia. Yeah, he said, you know, well, Sumi takes just his friends and wherever they come, you know, and which is true a little bit. But we do. I believe in another thing, you know, that knowledge is everywhere. You know, it's this embedded knowledge where an engineer have, where a dentist have, where people from the archives have. So we were interested at this moment for the book to find these people. You know, so the kind of embedded knowledge, I think, might become kind of a problem for the academic world, because there's so much embedded knowledge. You know, if we, I don't know, Yvonne, you might say that the knowledge which is in the offices of engineers is so high. Very often they are far in front of the university, and we have to see this. You know, there's a lot of knowledge there. So the question of the added value of research has become difficult in this sense, and we have to be careful.
Yes. I think I'm going to ask Maureen to make the last comment, if you'd like to, Maureen, and then Emmett is going to say goodnight to everybody and close up the conversation. Maureen, would you like to add anything at the end to this?
Yeah, thanks, Livia. Yeah, I love that your last thought there, Christian, about embedded knowledge. And it strikes me, just as when the pandemic broke, that our thoughts turned to the fantastic people who work behind the scenes in the arts. Even, you know, that a spotlight was shone on them. And I've always felt that those technical people who are just incredibly adept have so much to tell us about, you know, that they are artists. So that rings true with me very much, what you said just there. about just listening to every sort of person. That there's such incredible knowledge there that informs everything, that can add so much to everything that we do across all areas of society. And I just wanted to maybe finally say to Yvonne's thoughts just about students coming out, and it will be absolutely fascinating to see what impact this last strange period has on their work. I can't wait to see what impact it has. Many artists would say it's going to take a few years to come through, so it'll take a little while, but it will be fascinating, and I have no doubt it will add great depth to our lives. So thank you so much for having me here this evening. It's been fascinating.
Thank you, Maureen, and thanks, Yvonne. Emmett, would you like to wrap up for the evening? And I will say thank you to Christian as well from both of us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Livia, and thank you, everybody. Thank you especially to Christian for, I guess, I won't be able to top all of the wonderful insights to your work that have come from Maureen and Yvonne, but just some things that occurred this evening. I suppose one thing I'm reminded of watching you talk about your work is that you do always remind us about what it takes to stick with it, right? And to remain in love with the subject. And the range of work, I guess, reminds us that architecture cannot be exhausted. It will never reach some limit, and is always willing to offer you another way of looking at it and working with it, I think, as Christian and Marianne have done for some time now, if you kind of remain attentive to its needs. Thanks to Maureen for her clarity and commitment to supporting architects and architecture as a cultural force in Ireland and beyond. This is really heartening for many to hear and will surely carry them forward. And to Yvonne, who reminded us and told us again that imagination is free, and who never fails, I think, when she speaks about architecture, to communicate about architecture as if it were some kind of ban. A critical and serious one, but a ban nonetheless that can both offer comfort, but also confrontation on serious issues, face down, quality, longevity, endurance, sociability, and of course, our entire existence on this planet and our role to play in that conversation. Just before I finish, I just want to remind people, or let people know about some things that are coming up next week, which are also to do with architecture in the UCD Architecture Festival, which begins on the 27th of May and runs over the weekend. We have infiltrated the program this year a lot with architecture. This includes a conversation about the legacy of Temple Bar in Dublin with Shelley McNamara, Derek Tynan and Frank MacDonald, chaired by our colleagues me and Ellen Rowley. And work by Ellen and students of the first year Master of Architecture program with Tiago Faria, who will also be discussed and will be on display. There's a new exhibition about the legacy and history of Temple Bar, which will also be in Temple Bar. And last but not least, a webinar called This Is Where We Are Now, which is a student-led conversation about new ideas for living in Ireland, which is built on work that they have been looking at over the last year as their final year of Master of Architecture students. And that's on Friday, the 27th of May at 3 p.m. I suppose, as the others have been saying, each year at this time, those of us that teach, we do place some faith in our new graduates to carry their amazing intelligence into architecture forward out into the world and to our future. And perhaps to come back to the work that was discussed this evening, it's these ideas of carrying that occurred to me again and again over the course of Christian's talk. Carrying as an idea in architecture, carrying to support, carrying to take care so you don't let things fall away too soon, carrying to move, and also to take the weight. So what we carry with us is our home, perhaps, and our sense of ourselves in the built world. We read the world as we move through it, not only through our immediate surroundings, but also what we remember. Places where we once lived or visited, how rooms sounded, felt, echoed, how light came in one day on a corner we hung around as kids because it was somehow ours and we claimed it. Perhaps then we do well to recall that buildings are not only heavy things in themselves, but they're also there to carry weight, our weight, and the weight of all the human lives that are lived through them and in their company. And Christian really eloquently and elegantly reminded us of this tonight. This means, of course, that buildings, as we've seen, must be carefully made for a long time to carry that weight and indeed to carry the pressure of all the things that must withstand. And then what carries us with it, what carries us with it, which we've also touched on a lot this evening, is the culture of architecture. And this came across so strongly in the work, not only directly in terms of working with existing structures that are material and present and can be touched and used and felt, but also things from past and history, precedents, fragments, stories of projects your dad didn't approve of, which hang around in your head and years later still need to be told, indicating so clearly that work in architecture is built on work in architecture, and on these kinds and new kinds and other kinds of conversations on exchanges in architecture are essential to this conversation and to this continuity. So from all of us at UCD, from Livia and myself, I once again thank Christian, Maureen and Yvonne, and we look forward to meeting you again in the autumn. Good night and take care.
Thank you very much.